Welcome to Exhausting Stories, where tonight you'll drift through the pages of history. Close your eyes and join us as we descend into the final hours of a Roman gladiator's life, a warrior not of choice, but of fate. In the shadow of the Colosseum's towering walls, you'll walk the sands of the arena one last time, hearing distant cheers, iron gates clanging shut, and the silent thoughts of a man waiting for dawn. Tonight, you'll slip through his memories, from the distant lands he was taken from, to the brutal training grounds, to fleeting moments of laughter beneath olive trees. And now, in the hush before the crowd returns, he prepares not for battle, but for peace. If you enjoy stories that carry you gently through time, remember to subscribe, and let history whisper you to sleep. You're standing beneath the Colosseum as it first rose in 80 AD. The air is thick with the smell of damp stone and old blood. Torches flicker along the rough walls, casting restless shadows that seem to move on their own. Somewhere in the darkness, chains scrape against the floor. From above, the distant roar of wild beasts filters down, a reminder that you're not alone in these tunnels. You are a gladiator, spending your last night before your first fight. Soon the day's spectacles will begin. Beast hunts, executions, and then, at last, the gladiators. As you wait in the Hypogeum, the weight of the arena presses down from above, and the hours slip by heavy with questions and memories. Down here, beneath the Colosseum's arena, the world feels entirely different, colder, older, and far more uncertain than anything on the sunlit stones above. The Hypogeum is a maze of narrow corridors, low ceilings, and iron-barred cells. Its walls are thick with history, layered not just with the sweat and fear of those who waited, but with the ambitions of emperors. After 83 AD, Domitian ordered renovations that transformed this place into a complex network of tunnels, lifts, and animal pens. Each addition made the games above even more elaborate, but for those of us below, it only added to the sense that nothing here was left to chance. The stone around me is bitterly cold, pressing against my back and legs. Every surface seems to leach away warmth, as if the place itself is trying to remind me that comfort is a luxury for the living. Above, the muffled thump of footsteps and the distant scrape of armor echo through the stone, sometimes so faint I wonder if I'm imagining them. Down here, sounds don't travel the way they do in the open air. The tunnels swallow noise, making every shout or clang seem far away, as if the world above is already forgetting about us. Pilgrim, the straps at my wrists, feeling the roughness bite into my skin. Somewhere deeper in the Hypogeum, a low growl rumbles, a caged lion or tiger, restless and hungry. The sound carries through the darkness, followed by the harsh screech of metal as a guard adjusts the chains. Even in these quiet hours before dawn, the place never truly sleeps. The torchlight flickers, throwing shadows that stretch and twist across the walls. Sometimes I catch glimpses of shapes in those shadows, faces maybe, or just tricks of the smoke. The fires hiss and pop, giving off brief bursts of heat before everything returns to the damp chill. This isn't a place for rest. It's a world of mechanisms and waiting, of sweat, blood, and fear. If the arena above is a stage for spectacle, then the Hypogeum is the machinery that keeps the show running. Here, stagehands move quietly, tending to the lifts and trapdoors that will send men and animals bursting into the light at just the right moment. The ramps and pulleys, products of Roman ingenuity, are everywhere, but their cleverness feels more sinister than impressive to those of us waiting our turn. The audience above will gasp in awe when a bear seems to appear from nowhere, but we below see only the gears turning, the levers pulled, the hidden hands at work. My cell is barely wide enough for me to sit with my knees drawn up. The iron gate in front of me is crosshatched with rust, its surface rough enough to tear at my skin if I lean too close. Now, I keep my hands in my lap, letting the cold stones numb my fingers. The silence of the gate is unsettling. If it creaked or rattled, maybe it would feel alive. But as it stands, bolted and unmoving, it's just a barrier. Above, the Colosseum looms. Not just the physical weight of stone, but the knowledge that tens of thousands will soon be watching, their voices rising in a roar that shakes the ground. They say the arena is a place of glory, where the unknown can win immortality. But down here it feels more like a beast, alive, hungry, and utterly indifferent to who it devours. The cheers above are distant, replaced by the steady drip of water, the scrape of chains, and the smell of things best left forgotten. The air is thick with scent, iron from old blood, faint and metallic. The musty dampness of ancient stone, the oily smoke from torches that never seem to go out. There's a trace of animal musk too, drifting from the pens where lions and leopards wait. Even after the blood dries, its memory lingers in the cracks and corners, impossible to scrub away. Decay leaves its own mark, curling at the edges of my awareness, reminding me that everything here is temporary. Bodies, hopes, even fear. Earlier, as the guards led me through the upper tunnels, I caught glimpses of the hypogeum's inner workings. Rows of cages built for beasts so large, I could only guess their true size from the way the bars strained to hold them. Wood, stone, and iron come together in strange harmony. Ramps and lifts, designed to make men and animals appear as if by magic. The trapdoors, hidden in the arena floor, are part of this illusion, but down here, there's no magic, only sweat and careful planning. The engineering is impressive, but it's hard to admire when you're the one waiting to be sent up. I remember seeing bodies, lifeless and limp, carried away on carts for disposal. There was no ceremony, no public display, just a silent efficiency, the cycle of flesh moving on. I think about the system that keeps everything running. The Colosseum's designers planned for every detail, from the flow of combat to the removal of the dead. We, gladiators, slaves, animals, are all pieces in that system, each with a role to play. At first, I searched for weaknesses, watching the guards, studying the gates, hoping for a chance to slip away. But over time, I learned the rhythm of this place, the shuffle of feet, the low murmur of voices, the occasional clatter of a mechanism resetting for the next show. There's a pattern to it all, and that predictability is almost worse than chaos. It makes you realize how little control you truly have. The hypogeum is a machine, every part carved from stone or forged from iron, every movement rehearsed. The torchlight makes the darkness seem deeper, the shadows longer. Sometimes, a crack in the ceiling lets in a sliver of moonlight, bending across the floor in a pale arc. Some say these tunnels are haunted, not by angry spirits, but by the weight of all who have died here. I used to scoff at such talk, but now, sitting in the cold and quiet, I wonder if a place can learn to carry death. Tonight, the machinery is quiet, the lifts are still, the animals restless but contained. The silence presses in, broken only by the soft tap of my nails against the stone. Sometimes, I catch the distant sound of guards talking, their voices echoing down the tunnels in strange, broken rhythms. A laugh, sharp and sudden, cuts through the quiet before fading away. Dust spins in the air above the torches, catching the light for a moment before settling back into the shadows. I flex my fingers, feeling the ache in my wrists. The quiet is its own kind of torture. In this silence, uncertainty weighs heavier than any chain. Tomorrow, I'll rise from these shadows into the blinding light of the arena. When the gates open, I'll fight, or I won't. Survival might come down to the whim of the crowd, the mood of a sponsor, the luck of a single moment. They tell us these battles are about honor or courage, but down here, that talk feels empty. In the damp, breathless dark, honor means nothing, only survival matters. My thoughts drift back, turning over the choices and chances that led me here. Memory feels thin and fragile, almost unreal in this place. Was I really that young once, full of pride and purpose, or is that person gone, replaced by someone the Colosseum has shaped? The darkness here breaks time, letting memories float free from the weight of what comes next. The Hypogeum is a temple to sacrifice, and tonight it feels like the only truth that matters is what you carry within yourself. As the night stretches on, the boundaries between past and present blur. Down here, every man waits with his own story, of freedom lost, of choices made, of the long road that ends beneath the Colosseum. Some will meet the dawn, others won't. All of us are caught in the shadows of fate, waiting for the moment when the world above will remember us, if only for a heartbeat. Somewhere, a faint glimmer of light slips through a crack in the stone, hinting at the world beyond these walls. For a moment, I remember what it felt like to wake beneath an open sky, the air sharp with the promise of another day. That memory lingers, fragile but persistent, as the silence of the Hypogeum settles in once more, waiting, always waiting, for what comes next. Looking back, the journey from freedom to chains did not begin in the darkness of the Hypogeum, but in the blinding clarity of a morning I once thought was ordinary. My life before all this was simple. I was a farmer who had learned to fight, a son who worked the fields and trained with his father and brothers to defend our home. We lived by the rhythm of the land, waking early to the sound of birds and the distant stirrings of the village. I never imagined those routines would end so abruptly, or that I would be torn from those golden fields by the force of an empire I barely understood. The day the Romans came, we did what we could to resist. I stood with my people, sword in hand, facing the disciplined advance of their legions. Their formations moved with a purpose that felt unstoppable, pressing us back step by step. The clash was brief, more overwhelming than bloody. I remember the press of bodies, the shouts, the sting of smoke in my eyes. In the end, there was nowhere left to run. I was seized, my arms pinned by soldiers whose faces blurred into the twilight. Around me, others were gathered, some wounded, some barely standing. The fight was over. We were no longer warriors or farmers. We were spoils, stripped of purpose and claimed as property. The march to Rome blurred the line between days and nights. At first, I tried to keep count, but exhaustion and hunger dulled everything. We trudged along unfamiliar roads, watched by guards who offered no comfort. Some men fell along the way, too weak or sick to continue, and were left behind without ceremony. I learned quickly to keep my head down and conserve my strength, focusing on the next step rather than the distance ahead. Reached Rome, we were herded through streets that bustled with life, but it was the slave market that marked the true end of my old life. The place was noisy and crowded, filled with traders shouting over one another. We were displayed for inspection, lined up so buyers could examine our bodies for strength, scars, or any sign of endurance. I stood among men and women whose eyes had grown hollow from waiting. There was no privacy, no dignity, just the cold assessment of strangers deciding our value. When my turn came, I was pushed forward and turned for the crowd, my arms raised so they could see the muscle and old wounds. The buyer who chose me did so with barely a word, his gaze sharp and businesslike. I was sold and led away without even a chance to look back. Training began immediately. The lanista and his trainers, former gladiators themselves, wasted no time breaking us down and rebuilding us. Each day started before sunrise. We practiced with wooden swords, learned footwork, and drilled in pairs or small groups. The soreness was constant, my muscles aching in ways I hadn't known before. The trainers barked commands in clipped Latin, correcting our stances, forcing us to repeat movements until they became second nature. Mistakes were met with harsh words or a blow from a stick. There was no room for weakness or hesitation. Meals were simple but filling, designed to build strength. We ate barley porridge, beans and bread, with the occasional piece of meat. The diet was meant to keep us heavy and strong, able to absorb blows and endure long bouts. At night we slept in communal quarters, the air thick with sweat and the quiet murmurs of men too tired to speak. Some prayed softly, others simply stared at the ceiling, lost in thought or memory. The days blurred together. I learned to move as they wanted, to strike and block, to fall and rise again. The lanista watched us closely, deciding which weapons we would specialize in. My build and the way I moved marked me for close combat. I was handed a short sword and a shield, the tools of a mirmillo. The weight of the gear felt strange at first, but soon became as familiar as my own hands. We sparred often, sometimes until blood ran from split knuckles or a poorly blocked blow. The trainers pushed us hard, their goal not just to teach us to fight, but to turn us into performers, men who could survive and entertain at the same time. The psychological toll was just as heavy as the physical. Each day chipped away at the person I had been. My name was rarely spoken. The guards and trainers called us by numbers or nicknames. The routines left little time for thought, but at night, lying awake, I felt the loss of my old life most keenly. I missed the sound of my brother's laughter, the quiet of the fields at dusk, the sense that my future was my own to shape. Here, everything was decided for me. Still, there were moments of connection. In the yard, during short breaks, some men shared stories of home or whispered advice about surviving the games. There was a sense of camaraderie, even among rivals. We all understood the stakes. The criminal sentenced to die, the prisoner of war, the volunteer chasing glory. We were bound together by the same fate, forced to adapt or perish. The trainers encouraged this, knowing that a unit could be forged from shared hardship. After weeks of training, the Lannister selected a handful of us to visit the Colosseum. We walked through the city in a guarded group, catching glimpses of ordinary life, vendors selling fruit, children playing in the dust. But nothing prepared me for the sight of the Colosseum itself. Its massive arches and towering walls seemed to swallow the sky. Inside, the arena was both smaller and more immense than I had imagined. The sand was golden, perfectly smooth, and the stands rose high above, empty now but soon to be filled with thousands of eyes. I could almost hear the roar of the crowd, feel the weight of their expectation. The realization settled in. This was where my fate would be decided, not by my skill alone, but by the whims of a crowd and the will of those who controlled the games. That night, back at the Ludus, sleep did not come easily. I lay in the darkness, listening to the slow, steady breathing of the men around me. My thoughts circled back to the arena, to the life I had lost, and to the uncertain future ahead. The transformation from free man to gladiator was nearly complete, but part of me still resisted, clinging to memories of who I had been. The next morning, as the routines began again, I understood that the true battle was not just for survival in the arena, but for something deeper, the struggle to hold on to a sense of self in a world determined to erase it. Yet, as the days passed and the drills grew harsher, I could feel that resistance fading. The Ludus was shaping me, preparing me for a role I had never chosen. And soon, I would learn what it truly meant to be forged into a weapon for the entertainment of Rome. Inside the Ludus, everything changed. The school's stone walls seemed to close in tighter with each passing day, their purpose unmistakable, to shape us into something both dangerous and predictable. The word school felt misplaced here. There was no learning, only unlearning. Our names faded, replaced by numbers or nicknames barked across the yard. What mattered was discipline, obedience, and the ability to endure. Training began before sunrise. Guards stormed through the dormitories, their shouts and the thud of staves on stone snapping us awake. We stumbled into the yard, muscles already aching from the day before. The drills never changed. Thrust, parry, sidestep, repeat. Wooden practice swords weighed heavy in our hands. Their heft meant to make real weapons feel light by comparison. The repetition was relentless, designed to wear down not just the body, but the will. The Lannister watched over it all, his presence a constant reminder that our lives were his investment. He rarely raised his voice, preferring to let his trainers, hardened former gladiators, enforce the rules. Their punishments were swift. A missed block meant a sharp blow from a staff. A moment's hesitation earned extra laps hauling sandbags across the yard. The message was always clear. Mistakes were not tolerated. Pain was a teacher, and those who did not learn quickly found themselves left behind. Weapons training was as much about identity as skill. Each man was assigned arms based on his build, origin, and temperament. I was given a short sword and a broad rectangular shield, the tools of the Murmillo. My helmet was heavy, with a broad crest and a face guard that narrowed my vision. Others became secutores, their rounded helmets and smooth surfaces, designed to counter the net and trident of the retiarius. The retiari, lightly armoured, practiced casting their nets, and thrusting with their tridents, learning to keep their distance and strike with speed. Every pairing was deliberate, each weapon and armor combination chosen to create spectacle and balance in the arena. The trainers drilled us on every detail: how to hold the shield tight to the body, how to watch an opponent's feet rather than his eyes, how to conserve energy in the heat. We sparred with wooden swords, then with blunted steel. Bruises and split lips were common. Some men broke under the pressure, others adapted. The Lannisters' lessons echoed in my mind. Patience was as important as strength, and a cool head could mean the difference between life and death. Food was simple but calculated. Our rations of barley and beans earned us the nickname Barley Men, Hordearii. The diet was meant to build bulk and stamina, not pleasure. Sometimes a handful of dried fruit or a piece of cheese broke the monotony, but meat was rare, reserved for those who had earned favor. The food kept us strong, our bodies growing heavier and harder with each week. Not every moment was dominated by drills and discipline. In the brief pauses between sessions, small acts of camaraderie surfaced. I remember one afternoon during a long, punishing drill, when my throat burned from thirst and sweat stung my eyes. Aurelius, a veteran Momillo, offered me his water without a word. Another time, a fire broke out in the kitchen, and a group of us rushed in to help put it out, working side by side, without thought of rivalry or reward. These moments were rare, but they mattered. They reminded us that despite everything, we were still men, bound by the same fate, sharing the same hardships. The experienced fighters stood apart. They moved with an economy of motion, conserving energy and watching everything. Some offered advice to new recruits, quietly pointing out a better way to hold a shield or a warning about a trainer's favorite trick. Their respect was hard-won and rarely given, but when it came, it was a lifeline. I learned to listen more than I spoke, to watch their footwork, to mimic their patience. They had survived the arena, and their scars were lessons in themselves. Discipline in the ludus was absolute. The Lannisters' authority was unquestioned, and the punishments for defiance were harsh. I saw men flogged for refusing to spar, denied food for speaking out of turn, or made to stand in the sun with arms outstretched until they collapsed. The trainers enforced the rules with cold efficiency. They watched for weakness and rooted it out quickly. Rumors circulated that the Lannister had once fought in the arena himself, but whether true or not, his understanding of fear and pain was undeniable. Despite the constant pressure, a rhythm developed. We rose, trained, ate, and slept according to the schedule set for us. Resistance faded, replaced by a numb acceptance. My muscles hardened, my reflexes sharpened. I began to move without thinking, my body responding to commands before my mind caught up. The transformation was unsettling. I felt myself slipping further from the person I had been. The routines of the ludus erasing old habits and forging new instincts. At night, the dormitory was a place of uneasy quiet. Some men whispered about their families, the lives they had lost, or the hopes they still clung to. Others joked about the day's blunders, trading insults and laughter that faded quickly. A few lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unwilling to sleep for fear of what the next day might bring. The solidarity we found was fragile, tested by exhaustion and the knowledge that tomorrow we might be forced to fight each other. Rivalries formed as easily as friendships. Competition for the best weapons or a word of praise from the trainers could spark arguments or even fights. The trainers watched without intervening, letting us sort out our own hierarchy. Let the weak weed themselves out, they said. And we believed them because we had no choice. The most difficult lessons came not from the drills, but from the moments when we were forced to fight each other in earnest. These bouts were not to the death, but they were meant to draw blood, to teach us what it meant to inflict pain. The first time I faced Aurelius in such a match, I hesitated. He had shared his water with me, helped me when I stumbled during a drill, but in the ring, none of that mattered. We fought, sticks first, then swords. By the end, my arm throbbed with pain, and blood trickled from a cut on his cheek. There was no victory, only survival. As we left the yard, our eyes met for a moment, and I saw in his expression the same hardening that I felt in myself. The days in the ludus blurred together, each one a repetition of the last. Training, eating, sleeping, always under the watchful eyes of the trainers and the ever-present threat of punishment. The routines stripped away everything unnecessary, leaving only what was useful in the arena. I learned to move with purpose, to fight without hesitation, to accept pain as part of life. The transformation was gradual, but by the time the call came for my first fight, I was no longer the man who had arrived at the gates of the ludus. Pem. That morning, the trainers handed out our weapons and checked our armor. The lanista walked the line, his gaze lingering on each of us in turn. There was no speech, no encouragement, only a nod and the order to follow. We filed out in silence, the weight of what was coming settling over us. As we made our way through the corridors beneath the Colosseum, the sounds of the crowd above reached us, a distant, rumbling roar that grew louder with every step. The routines of the ludus had prepared us as much as anything could, but nothing in the school could fulling training and reality disappeared, replaced by the knowledge that this time there would be no second chances. You ready a man for the moment when the gates opened and the light of the arena spilled in. The moment the trainers led us from the darkness of the passageway, the world changed. The arena's roar, my first taste of it, was like nothing I'd ever heard before. The sound wasn't just noise, it was a force, pressing in from every side, alive with the anticipation of tens of thousands of spectators. For the crowd, this was the main event, a gladiator's debut, another story to cheer or jeer from the safety of their seats. For us, it was a test of everything we'd endured in the ludus, and a reminder that survival was never guaranteed. We waited in the holding chamber, the air thick with sweat, oil, and the metallic tang of old blood. My armor and helmet, plain utilitarian, felt heavier than usual, as if the weight of what was coming had settled onto my shoulders. I checked the curved rectangular scutum strapped to my arm, running my fingers over the battered wood and iron. The gladius at my side was sharp and balanced, its familiarity both reassuring and terrifying. I tried to focus on the small rituals of preparation, tightening straps, adjusting the chin guard, flexing my fingers to keep the blood flowing. Around me, other gladiators did the same, each lost in their own routine, each waiting for the call that would send them into the light. A trainer barked a final order. We lined up, silent and tense, and marched through the narrow corridor. The passage felt colder than before, even as sunlight pooled at the far end. Every step brought us closer to the sound of the crowd, cheering, chanting, stamping their feet in waves that vibrated through the stone. Above us, the Colosseum itself seemed to breathe, its arches and tiers packed with people hungry for spectacle. I caught glimpses of banners waving, the flash of gold from an official's cloak, the distant figure of the emperor seated in his box, ready to judge not just the fight, but the fighters themselves. The gate's machinery groaned, gears grinding as the heavy iron lifted. Sunlight flooded in, blinding after so many days underground. I blinked, adjusting to the glare, and stepped onto the sand. The heat struck first, radiating from the arena floor and the white stone walls above. My vision narrowed as I took in the sheer scale of the amphitheater. Tiers upon tiers of faces, a living sea that stretched in every direction. The noise rolled over us, chants and shouts blurring into a single, pulsing rhythm. It was impossible to pick out individual voices, but the energy was unmistakable. They wanted action, drama, and blood. Across the sand, my opponent waited. He was older, heavier, his armor gleaming in the sun. The crest on his helmet and the confident way he stood marked him as a mumio, a veteran. He carried a large scutum and a straight-edged gladius, his stance low and measured. I recognized the style from countless sparring sessions, but nothing in training could prepare me for the reality of facing a man who had already survived the arena. A horn sounded, the crowd surged to its feet, and the fight began. There was no time to think, only to move. He advanced quickly, shield raised, testing my guard with a probing strike. I braced behind my own scutum, feeling the jolt as his blade glanced off the rim. The first real impact sent pain shooting up my arm, but I held my ground, circling to keep him in front of me. He pressed harder, each blow calculated, trying to drive me backward and force a mistake. Circled, sand shifting beneath our boots, the sun beating down on our helmets. My breathing echoed inside the metal, hot and shallow. The crowd's roar faded into the background as my focus narrowed, watching his feet, reading the tension in his shoulders, waiting for the moment when he would commit. When he lunged, I reacted on instinct, swinging my shield to deflect the attack. The iron edge met his blade with a sharp clang, and I twisted away, feeling the rush of air as his gladius missed my side by inches. Pueblo, that first exchange set the tone. He pressed forward, relentless, using his weight and experience to keep me off balance. I gave ground, keeping my shield high, searching for a weakness. The sand made every step uncertain, and the heat inside my armor grew oppressive. My mind flickered to the lessons drilled into me in the ludus. Patience, awareness, never waste a movement. I waited for him to overreach, to give me an opening. It came suddenly. He feinted high, drawing my shield up, then swung low toward my leg. I managed to deflect the blow, but the force spun me sideways. He closed in, trying to pin me against the arena wall. My back foot skidded in the sand, and for a moment I saw only his helmet and the glint of his blade. I ducked, drove my shoulder forward, and shoved him off balance with my shield. He stumbled, and I struck, my gladius slicing a shallow line across his thigh. The crowd erupted, sensing the shift. Blood on the sand was what they wanted, and now they had it. He recovered quickly, anger flashing in his eyes. The next moments blurred, blows exchanged, shields battered, sweat stinging my eyes. I felt his blade graze my ribs, a sharp sting that threatened to sap my focus, but I held on, refusing to yield. When he overcommitted on a swing, I saw my chance. I stepped inside his guard and drove my gladius into his side, feeling the resistance give way. He staggered, dropping his shield, and collapsed onto the sand. Relief and exhaustion hit me at once. The fight was finished, but the experience lingered. I could barely feel my legs as I made my way back toward the passageway, the sand clinging to my boots and the weight of my armor suddenly unbearable. The noise of the crowd faded behind me, replaced by the quiet of the tunnels. I removed my helmet, letting the sweat drip down my face, and tried to steady my breathing. My first fight was over, and I had survived. The passageway. I found a standard. Doubting John's back in the ludus, the atmosphere was subdued. The other gladiators offered nods, brief acknowledgements that spoke more than words. There was no celebration, only a quiet recognition of what it meant to return from the arena. The trainers watched us closely, gauging our reactions, marking who had faced death and come back changed. I felt pride, but it was mixed with something colder, a numbness that settled into my bones. The memory of the fight replayed in my mind. The sun on the sand, the clang of iron, the look in my opponent's eyes as he pleaded for his life. My leaders are home, a standing. That night, sleepwalked, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady breathing of the men around me. My thoughts drifted to home, to faces I would never see again, and to the strange brotherhood that had formed among those of us who survived. The arena had stripped away everything but the essentials: skill, endurance, and the will to live. Yet in the aftermath, I found myself wondering about the men beside me. We had all fought, all faced the same terror, and all returned bearing scars no one else could see. Start the Larges, the American schoolmen, Meyerby who would be Reeves. I found the costume scars outer. In the days that followed, the events of my first fight became a quiet marker among the others. Some men congratulated me with a nod or a word, others kept their distance. I watched them, trying to understand who might one day stand beside me and who might stand across from me. The bonds we formed in the ludus were strange things, curious mixtures of shared struggle, fleeting laughter, and the silent knowledge that any friendship might one day be drowned in blood. Even in the shadow of the arena, daily life in the Ludus was shaped as much by the people around me as by the routines themselves. Bonds of brotherhood and betrayal were not just a theme. They were the reality that coloured every meal, every bruise, every night spent staring at the ceiling and wondering who would be missing from the bunks by morning. The strange sense of unity grew from the small things: a shared bowl of barley porridge, a quick nod of encouragement before drills, the silent passing of a water skin after a punishing session in the yard. We came from everywhere: Gaul, Thrace, Numidia, Rome itself, each carrying our own stories. Yet those differences faded in the face of the same relentless training and the same threat of punishment. The Ludus, for all its cruelty, forced us together. We learned to rely on each other for advice, for a laugh, for a warning about which trainer to avoid on a bad day. In a place where trust could be dangerous, it was also necessary. One friendship in particular stood out. Felix, quick-witted, sharp-eyed, a survivor in every sense, became my closest companion. He was the first to offer me a word of advice, the first to make a joke at the trainer's expense, and the first to show me that humour could survive even here. Felix had a habit of flipping a small coin between his fingers, a token from his mother that he said brought luck. "Keep your eyes open and your head down," he'd whisper, "and maybe you'll see another sunrise." He was smaller than most, but he moved with a confidence that made you forget his size. The trainers noticed, though they pretended not to. Felix's cleverness was his armour, and he wore it well. He told me about his village, about the river where he'd fished as a boy, about the coin his mother pressed into his hand the night the soldiers came. I listened, grateful for the distraction. In return, I shared what little I could remember of home. These exchanges became our shield against the loneliness that pressed in from all sides. But the same closeness that made the days bearable also made them dangerous. Rivalries simmered just beneath the surface, fueled by competition for the few privileges the Ludus offered. Once, two men fought over a single, well-balanced sword, the kind that could make the difference between victory and death in the arena. The trainers let the fight play out, their faces unreadable. When it was over, one man limped away with the sword, the other nursed a broken nose and a bruised ego. It was a reminder that even the best friendships could be tested by the need to survive. That tension was everywhere. The hierarchy in the Ludus shaped everything. Experienced fighters, their scars marking them as survivors, often took new recruits under their wing. Some did it out of a sense of duty, others for the chance to build alliances that might one day save their own skin. Cassius, a veteran whose presence filled any room, once corrected my grip on the Gladiator with a few blunt words and a demonstration. "Don't waste your strength," he said, his tone flat. "Save it for when it matters." Advice like that was valuable, but it always came with strings attached. Cassius expected respect, maybe even loyalty, and he watched for any sign of weakness or betrayal. Felix and I felt the weight of that hierarchy too. Sometimes it worked in our favour. A nod from a veteran could mean better rations, or a warning before a particularly brutal drill. Other times it meant keeping your head down when tensions flared, or stepping aside when a senior fighter claimed a spot at the table. The trainers rarely intervened unless discipline broke down completely. Their attitude was clear. Let the strong rise, let the weak fall. We all understood that the only constant was change, and that today's ally could be tomorrow's opponent. Still, the bonds we built were real. At night, the dormitory filled with the low hum of conversation. Someone carved small animals from scraps of wood, passing them out as tokens of goodwill. Others whispered prayers or told stories in their native tongues. In those moments, the walls of the Ludus seemed less oppressive. We became more than just fighters. We became a community, however fragile. But nothing in the Ludus lasted forever. The closer you grew to someone, the greater the risk. I learned this lesson too late. The morning the Lannister's messenger read out the day's matchups, I felt a chill before I even heard the names. Felix's was called first, then mine. I'd always known we might one day face each other, but I'd hoped for more time, a few more days, a few more shared jokes. The trainers gave nothing away. To them, the pairing was just another way to keep the games interesting. For us, it was a test we could never have prepared for. In the holding chamber beneath the arena, Felix sat beside me, flipping his coin in his palm. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we couldn't say. I tried to find the right words, to thank him, to apologize, to promise something I couldn't deliver. In the end, I said nothing. Felix looked up, managed a tight smile, and said only, "Let's make it quick." When the gate opened, the noise of the crowd crashed over us. The sun was blinding, the sand hot beneath our feet. We faced each other, shields raised, gladii drawn. The crowd wanted a show, and the Emperor watched from his box, ready to decide our fate. Every lesson from the Ludus echoed in my mind. Keep your guard up, watch the eyes, never hesitate. But this was Felix. Every movement felt wrong, every strike slower than it should have been. We circled, testing each other with cautious blows. The crowd grew impatient, their jeers rising. Felix broke the stalemate first, lunging with a speed I'd seen 100 times in training. I blocked, countered, but my heart wasn't in it. He pressed the attack, forcing me back, his eyes never leaving mine. I remembered the nights we'd spent talking, the stories he'd shared, the way he'd laughed even when the world seemed hopeless. The end came quickly. Felix slipped past my guard, the edge of his blade grazing my arm. I reacted on instinct, driving my shield forward, catching him off balance. My gladius found its mark, and Felix fell, the coin slipping from his hand into the sand. The crowd erupted, but I heard nothing. I knelt beside him, my breath ragged. Felix managed a faint smile, his fingers closing around mine for a moment before falling still. The guards dragged his body away, and I was left alone in the center of the arena, the cheers of the crowd fading into a dull roar in my ears. I picked up his coin, turning it over in my palm, the metal warm from the sun. The arbiter looked to the Emperor, but there was no mercy to grant. The fight was done, and the bond that had helped me survive the worst days of the Ludus was gone. The dormitory felt emptier. The men who had once shared stories and laughter now kept their distance, unsure of what to say. I caught Cassius watching me, his expression unreadable. The trainers moved on, already focused on the next group of recruits. I tucked Felix's coin into my belt, a reminder of what I'd lost, and of what the Colosseum could take from any of us at any moment. Trust, I realized, was a luxury we could barely afford. Every friendship carried a risk. Every alliance could end with a name called in the morning and a fight to the death by afternoon. The Colosseum thrived on these tensions, feeding off both our loyalty and our betrayals. In the end, all that remained were memories of brotherhood, of rivalry, of the moments when we dared to hope for something more. As the days passed, I found myself returning to the past more often. I would sit alone, turning Felix's coin in my fingers, thinking of the life I'd left behind. The walls of the Ludus seemed to close in tighter, the air growing heavier with each memory that surfaced. I tried to hold on to the lessons Felix had taught me, to the sense of belonging we'd built together. But the reality was clear. In this world, even the strongest bonds could be broken in an instant. The echoes of my old life reached me most clearly in the quiet moments, when the world outside my cell feels impossibly far away. In these hours, the noise of the Ludus and the looming threat of the arena fade, leaving only the persistent, bittersweet ache of memory. What I once was, son, brother, a boy who knew the rhythm of the land, feels like a story told about someone else. Yet, Even as the days in chains pile up, certain memories refuse to let go. Sometimes it's my mother's voice that finds me first. She always sang in the mornings, her melody weaving through the sound of bread rising in the hearth and the soft clatter of wooden spoons. I can't recall the words anymore, but the tune lingers, gentle and steady, a thread I follow back to a kitchen filled with warmth. Her song was like the pulse of each day, marking time as surely as the sun's climb over the fields. When the darkness of the hypogeum presses in, I catch myself humming fragments of that melody, almost without thinking. It's a small rebellion against the silence here, a way of reminding myself that I was once more than a number. Other times, it's my brother's laughter that breaks through. He was younger, quick to joke, always turning work into a game. We'd race through the fields at dawn, sides flashing in the golden light, daring each other to finish first. His laughter would ring out, sharp and bright, as he teased me for falling behind or missing a patch of wheat. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see the way he leaned on his scythe at the end of a long row, sweat shining on his brow, grinning as if nothing in the world could touch us. That sound, more than anything, makes the loss real. It cuts through the numbness, reminding me that there was once a time when fear and pain were distant things. The life I lost was never grand, but it was mine. Early mornings in the village, dew clinging to the grass, the air cool and silent before the day's work began. My father's rough hands guiding mine as we planted seeds, his voice low and certain as he explained how the land would answer if you treated it well. The smell of earth and grain, the quiet pride of a harvest gathered with family. These are the details that linger. I remember the way my mother would wipe flour from her hands before ruffling my hair. The way my brother tried to mimic our father's stride, always a little too eager. These moments come back in flashes, sharp and clear, then fade to a dull ache. Not all memories are gentle. The day everything changed remains vivid, no matter how many times I try to push it away. Soldiers arrived without warning, their armor catching the sun, their faces unreadable. The village erupted in chaos. Shouts, the crash of doors, the sickening realization that nothing would be the same. I remember the press of bodies as we were rounded up, the rough grip of a soldier's hand on my shoulder, the last glimpse of my home as the line of captives moved away. In the Ludus, you learn quickly to bury the past if you want to survive. Every day is built around routine, training, eating, sleeping, all under the watchful eyes of the trainers. The old life is supposed to fade, replaced by the demands of the present. Some men manage it by clinging to small objects hidden in their tunics, a carved token, a scrap of cloth, a twist of hair. I had nothing to bring with me but my memories. For a while, I tried to let them go, to become what the Lanista wanted, a weapon, a performer, nothing more. But the mind has its own way of holding on. Baptized, there are nights when the memories come unbidden, filling the silence with images I can't escape. My mother's song, my brother's laughter, the steady presence of my father, they return in the darkness, sometimes as comfort, sometimes as torment. The pain of remembering is sharp, but the thought of forgetting is worse. I fear losing even the smallest detail. The way sunlight filtered through the trees at the edge of our field, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of a shared meal. These fragments are all that remain of the person I was before Rome took everything. Fiancé, the emotional weight of this separation is hard to describe to anyone who hasn't lived it. The arena demands everything: strength, focus, the willingness to hurt or be hurt. But it also demands that you let go of who you were. The more you cling to the past, the harder it is to raise your shield, to face the man across from you without hesitation. Some men dull the ache with bravado or anger, turning every memory into fuel for survival. Others go quiet, retreating so far into themselves that nothing seems to touch them. I find myself somewhere in between, unable to let go but struggling to carry the weight. Unlawfuls, I wonder if my family remembers me, or if I am already a shadow in their minds. Does my mother still sing in the mornings? Does my father look to the horizon, hoping for a son who will never return? The questions circle endlessly, impossible to answer. There are days when I wish I could forget them completely, just to make the pain stop. But even in my lowest moments, I find myself reaching back, holding tight to the hope that somewhere they might think of me as I once was. Show me the rituals of the ludus help distract from these thoughts, but they never fully silence them. I sharpen my sword, polish my shield, repeat the movements drilled into me until my arms ache. I watch the other men, some lost in prayer, others silent and still. We each have our own ways of coping. For me, it's the act of remembering, allowing the memories to surface, letting them anchor me even as they hurt. In a place designed to erase the past, the act of holding on feels almost defiant. There is one memory I return to more than any other. It's nothing dramatic, just a moment at the end of a long day. My brother and I sitting on the fence that marked the edge of our land. The field stretched out before us, golden in the fading light. We didn't speak much, just watched as the sky shifted from blue to orange, the silence between us comfortable and easy. I hold on to that feeling, the sense of belonging, of being known and accepted. It's a memory untouched by fear or loss, and in the quiet of my cell, it becomes a kind of refuge. The contrast between that world and this one is stark. The soft earth beneath my feet is gone, replaced by unyielding stone. The voices that once filled my days with laughter and comfort have been replaced by orders barked in a language that still feels foreign. The freedom to choose how I spend my days has vanished, replaced by a schedule dictated by the needs of the games. Yet even here, the past refuses to be silenced. Simultaneously, in the deepest part of the night, I whisper a name, one I haven't spoken aloud in years. I let the sound hang in the air, soft and uncertain, a link to the life I lost. I don't know if anyone hears, or if the stone walls simply swallow it whole. But the act itself brings a measure of peace, a reminder that I am still more than what Rome has made me. Waste's dawn approaches. The memories grow sharper, as if the coming light draws them out of the shadows. The world beyond my cell remains silent for now, but I know the city is waking. Soon, the routines of the ludus will begin again, and the demands of survival will take over. For a little while longer, though, I allow myself to drift in the space between past and present, holding tight to the echoes of a life that once felt endless. The hours before sunrise are always the hardest. The mind drifts, replaying what was lost, measuring the distance between who I am and who I was. Yet, as the first hints of light creep across the ceiling, something shifts. The memories that once felt like a burden become a source of quiet strength. They remind me that, even in this place, I am still connected to something beyond the arena, something that cannot be taken by force. I close my eyes, letting the last notes of my mother's song and the echo of my brother's laughter settle around me. The world outside grows lighter, the silence of the hypogeum deepening as the city prepares for another day. In these final moments of darkness, I hold on to what remains, drawing comfort from the distant echoes of a lost life. Soon, the world will call me back to the present, and I will have to face whatever comes with the dawn. There is one memory I return to more than any other. It's nothing dramatic, just a moment at the end of a long day. My brother and I sitting on the fence that marked the edge of our land, the field stretched out before us, golden in the fading light. We didn't speak much, just watched as the sky shifted from blue to orange, the silence between us comfortable and easy. I hold on to that feeling, the sense of belonging, of being known and accepted. It's a memory untouched by fear or loss, and in the quiet of my cell, it becomes a kind of refuge. The contrast between that world and this one is stark. The soft earth beneath my feet is gone, replaced by unyielding stone. The voices that once filled my days with laughter and comfort have been replaced by orders barked in a language that still feels foreign. The freedom to choose how I spend my days has vanished, replaced by a schedule dictated by the needs of the games. Yet even here, the past refuses to be silenced. Simultaneously, in the deepest part of the night, I whisper a name, one I haven't spoken aloud in years. I let the sound hang in the air, soft and uncertain, a link to the life I lost. I don't know if anyone hears, or if the stone walls simply swallow it whole. But the act itself brings a measure of peace, a reminder that I am still more than what Rome has made me. Waste's dawn approaches. The memories grow sharper, as if the coming light draws them out of the shadows. The world beyond my cell remains silent for now, but I know the city is waking. Soon, the routines of the ludus will begin again, and the demands of survival will take over. For a little while longer, though, I allow myself to drift in the space between past and present, holding tight to the echoes of a life that once felt endless. The hours before sunrise are always the hardest. The mind drifts, replaying what was lost, measuring the distance between who I am and who I was. Yet, as the first hints of light creep across the ceiling, something shifts. The memories that once felt like a burden become a source of quiet strength. They remind me that, even in this place, I am still connected to something beyond the arena, something that cannot be taken by force. I close my eyes, letting the last notes of my mother's song and the echo of my brother's laughter settle around me. The world outside grows lighter, the silence of the hypogeum deepening as the city prepares for another day. In these final moments of darkness, I hold on to what remains, drawing comfort from the distant echoes of a lost life. Soon, the world will call me back to the present, and I will have to face whatever comes with the dawn. Night in the hypogeum was unlike any other. The world above had gone quiet, its noise replaced by a hush that pressed in from every side. Down here, the air felt dense and unmoving, carrying the memory of thousands of footsteps and the weight of tomorrow. This was the night before dawn, a time set apart, when the final hours stretched and folded in on themselves, and every breath seemed to count for more than it should. The city's sounds, once a constant presence, faded into a distant echo. Now and then, a cart rattled far away or a dog barked, but these traces of ordinary life barely reached the underground chambers. Instead, the noises that remained were those of the Colosseum itself, the grinding of trapdoor gears somewhere in the maze of corridors, the occasional murmur of guards exchanging brief words, and the low, restless movements of men waiting for morning. The torches along the walls burned low, their light casting long, thin shadows that crawled across the stone and flickered along the uneven floor. The cold seeped up from beneath, settling into every joint and muscle. Deepest, in this strange suspended time, every gladiator found a way to cope. Some men clung to small routines. I sat with my gladius across my knees, the familiar weight grounding me in the present. I ran a whetstone along its edge, not because it needed sharpening, but because the scrape of metal on stone gave my hands something to do. The sound was steady, controlled, and it forced my mind away from the endless circle of what-ifs. My helmet, polished earlier, sat beside me, a ritual as much as a necessity. I checked the chin strap, adjusted the padding, then set it down again. These actions didn't change anything, but they offered a sense of order, a way to impose calm on a world that had none. Nearby, others moved through their own preparations. One man, a Thracian with weathered hands, pressed his palms together in silent prayer, his lips moving in a language I didn't know. Another paced the length of the chamber, counting his steps over and over. A third sat quietly, eyes closed, his fingers wrapped around a small coin replica tied to a leather string, a token from home perhaps, meant to guard him through whatever came next. There were no words between us. Each man was alone with his thoughts, united only by the knowledge that dawn would bring an end to this waiting, where, though it wore many faces, some men tried to hide it behind bravado or jokes, others let it show in the way their hands shook or their eyes darted toward the exit. For me, fear came in waves, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, always present. I tried to meet it with ritual, checking my gear, repeating the same motions, forcing my breathing to slow. It wasn't courage I searched for, but control. The rituals helped, if only a little. They made the fear manageable, gave it shape, and kept it from spilling over into panic. I wondered how many men before me had sat in this same spot, listening to the same distant sounds, feeling the same cold settle into their bones. The Colosseum was old, its stones worn smooth by the passage of years and the countless lives that had ended here. The Hypogeum was a place of endings and beginnings, a threshold between the safety of darkness and the brutal clarity of the arena. In these hours, the line between past and present blurred. I thought of Felix and the others who would never see another sunrise, of the brief friendships and rivalries that defined life in the Ludus. Their absence was a presence in itself, a reminder that every man here was only one dawn away from being a memory. As the night deepened, the chamber seemed to shrink. The silence grew heavier, broken only by the occasional shifting of armor or the soft clink of a weapon set down on stone. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the darkness settle over me. Images drifted through my mind, my mother's song, my brother's laughter, the feel of earth beneath my hands. They came unbidden, fragments of a life that felt impossibly distant. I tried to hold on to them, not as a distraction, but as a way to remind myself that I had been more than a number, more than a fighter. There was comfort in the small details, the texture of the leather grip on my gladius, the familiar creak of my armor as I shifted, the faint scent of oil and sweat that clung to everything. These things were real, immediate, and they kept me anchored in the moment. I focused on the rhythm of my breath, counting each inhale and exhale, letting the repetition calm my nerves. Around me, the other men did the same, each lost in their own routines. Somewhere deeper in the Hypogeum, the grinding of gears signaled the start of preparations above. The distant sound was both a warning and a promise, the machinery of the Colosseum coming to life, readying itself for the day ahead. The guards' voices grew a little sharper, their movements more purposeful. The energy in the chamber shifted, the sense of waiting replaced by a slow, building tension. We all felt it, the way the air seemed to thicken, the way the silence broke into smaller, sharper pieces. I found myself watching a younger gladiator across the room. He was new, his fear obvious in the way he gripped his sword and stared at the ground. He wore a small pouch around his neck, the drawstring pulled tight. I guessed it held something from home, a sprig of dried herb maybe, or a carved bead. He caught my eye for a moment, then looked away, his shoulders hunched. I remembered what it was like to be that new, to believe that luck or a token could tip the balance in your favor. Maybe it could. Maybe in a place like this, anything that offered hope was worth holding on to. The rituals continued as the night wore on. Some men whispered prayers to their gods, others traced patterns in the dust with the tips of their fingers. A few simply sat in silence, eyes fixed on the floor, waiting for the first hint of light. I tried to find a balance between memory and focus, letting myself remember just enough to hold on to who I was, but not so much that it would break me when the time came to stand and fight. The final hour was the hardest. The darkness seemed to press in tighter, the air colder and more oppressive. Every sound became sharper, the grinding of gears, the shuffle of feet, the quiet murmur of a guard checking the locks. My thoughts circled back to the arena, to the sand waiting just beyond the gate, to the faces in the crowd whose cheers and jeers could decide a man's fate. I wondered if I would be remembered, or if I would simply vanish, another name lost to the records of the games. As the first pale light seeped through the cracks in the stone above, the chamber changed. Shadows retreated, replaced by thin lines of gold that crept along the floor and climbed the walls. The torches guttered, their flames nearly spent, but the sunlight grew stronger, filling the space with a cold, clear promise. The guards moved with more urgency now, their voices low but firm as they checked weapons and armor, calling names in quick succession. I stood, stretching stiff muscles, and gathered my things. The helmet slid into place with a familiar weight, the gladius fitting easily into my hand. I glanced once more at the men around me, some whispering last words, others silent, all of us caught in the same current. The younger gladiator clutched his pouch, eyes wide and unblinking. I offered a brief nod, not sure if he saw it, then turned my attention to the door. The foredawn had passed, leaving only the certainty of what came next. The air in the hypogeum shifted, alive with the restless energy of men preparing to meet their fate. The grinding of the gates echoed through the chamber, louder now, a signal that the moment was close. Every sense sharpened, every thought narrowed to a single point. The world was about to change. That last quiet moment, I pressed my palm to the rough stone wall, feeling its cool solidity beneath my hand. I let the memory of my mother's song and my brother's laughter settle in my mind, drawing strength from the past as I faced the future. The light grew brighter, the sounds louder, the tension thicker. The gates would open soon, and whatever waited beyond them would be met head-on. The chamber was no longer a place of waiting, but a space suspended on the edge of something unknown. The air buzzed with anticipation, every heartbeat counting down to the instant when the world outside the hypogeum would crash in. I took one last breath, steady and deliberate, and stepped forward, ready for whatever the day would bring. The first hint of movement came with a shiver along the floor, a vibration that signaled the ancient machinery was waking. The air in the hypogeum shifted, charged with anticipation and the sharp scent of oil and iron. Somewhere down the corridor, gears locked into place and the massive gate ahead creaked. This was the moment every gladiator recognized. The threshold between darkness and the arena, between anonymity and the gaze of thousands. Dismissing light began to spill through the widening gap, pale at first, and then blinding. The iron bars, streaked with rust and old scars, lifted in small, uneven jerks. Each motion let in more of the world outside, until the full force of morning sunlight invaded the tunnel. I blinked, eyes adjusting, and saw the sand of the Colosseum glowing gold, broken only by the dark patches that marked where blood had soaked in and never quite left. The sand was soft and loose underfoot, but those stains told their own story, one that every man here understood without words, and a sound followed. It started as a distant hum, then surged into a roar that filled every space, bouncing off stone and bone alike. 50,000 voices, layered and overlapping, merged into a single, living force. The noise was overwhelming, a physical thing that pressed in from all sides. Somewhere above, the velarium, a vast canvas awning stretched over the upper tiers, cast broad swathes of shade, cooling the highest seats and shifting the patterns of light across the crowd. Even in the open air, the Colosseum was engineered for spectacle, for comfort and control, for the careful arrangement of every moment. The opening procession had already wound its way across the arena. Trumpeters and musicians had filled the air with music, followed by dancers and performers, and statues of the gods borne high on litters. The official responsible for today's games had taken his place, surrounded by his entourage. The parade had set the tone, but it was the appearance of the gladiators that everyone waited for. Now, with the gates open, the promise of the day was about to be fulfilled. Far ground, the sunlight hit with full force, reflecting off the white stone and the polished metal of armor. The sky above was impossibly blue, the Colosseum's arches rising higher than seemed possible. The stands were packed, the tiers organized by class, elites and officials, closest to the action, their seats cushioned and shaded, while the masses filled the upper rows beneath the velarium's shifting shadow. The emperor's box dominated the podium, surrounded by senators, vestal virgins, and other dignitaries. Their presence was a reminder that fate in the arena was not just a matter. The crowd's energy was contagious, rolling in ways that made the sand vibrate beneath my boots. Some spectators cheered, others chanted. A few called out names of favored fighters. The sound was never constant, sometimes a wall of noise, sometimes a sudden hush as attention shifted or a new performer entered the arena. I could feel the weight of all those eyes, each person searching for drama, for courage, for the possibility of witnessing something unforgettable. My mind raced through the lessons drilled into every gladiator. Conserve your energy. Watch your opponent's feet, not his eyes. Trust your training. But the reality of the arena was always different from the yard at the Ludus. The heat radiating from the sand, the glare of the sun, the pressure of the crowd, these things changed everything. My armor felt heavier, my helmet narrowed my vision, and the shield in my left hand was suddenly more than a tool. It was a lifeline. Across the sand, another gate opened. From the opposite tunnel, another gladiator emerged, his silhouette blurred by the haze rising from the ground. I could just make out the shape of his helmet and the glint of his blade. We both paused, measuring the distance, each of us aware that the next few moments could decide everything. The tension between us was electric, a silent communication that needed no words. We were both here for the same reason, both shaped by the same routines, both trying to hide any sign of fear. The crowd sensed the change, their voices dropping into a collective murmur. All eyes shifted to the two figures on the sand. In the Emperor's box, movement caught my attention. A subtle gesture, a shift in posture, the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. The official responsible for the games watched closely, ready to judge not just the outcome, but the manner in which it was achieved. The crowd's reactions would matter, but the final decision rested with those in the podium. I adjusted my grip on the gladius, feeling the rough leather against my palm. My shield strap creaked as I shifted its weight. Every detail seemed magnified. The swirl of dust at my feet, the shimmer of light on the sand, the faint scent of sweat and oil rising from my armor. My opponent's stance was careful, balanced, betraying little. I tried to read the subtle cues, the way he held his shield, the set of his shoulders, the timing of his breath. The arena felt timeless in that moment. The Colosseum's walls rose around us, tier upon tier, filled with people but also with history. Generations had watched from these seats, their cheers and shouts echoing through the stone. The sand beneath my feet was layered with the stories of those who had come before. Victors who left through the door of victory, the Porta Triumphalis, and the defeated carried out through the Porta Libertinaria, glory and oblivion, separated by a few heartbeats and the will of the crowd. I could sense the anticipation building, not just in the stands but in myself, my heart beat faster, adrenaline sharpening my senses. The moment before the signal felt endless, stretched thin by the weight of possibility. I could hear the distant call of a bird, the scrape of a sandal on stone, the faint click as a guard somewhere adjusted his armor. Every sense was heightened, every detail urgent. Then the trumpet sounded, a clear, piercing note that cut through the noise and signaled the beginning. The crowd surged to its feet, their voices rising in a single, unified cheer. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of energy that threatened to sweep everything away. I took my first step onto the sand, feeling the world contract around me. All that mattered was the opponent across from me, and the uncertain promise of what might come. We circled, each watching for the first sign of movement. The rules of the Ludus echoed in my mind, but instinct soon took over. The sand slipped beneath my boots, the heat pressed down from above, and the noise of the crowd became a distant hum. My world narrowed to a point, the space between my shield and his blade, the angle of his approach, the timing of each breath. The fight itself was always a mystery, unfolding moment by moment. No amount of training could predict exactly what would happen once the gates opened. Every bout was different. Sometimes skill decided the outcome, sometimes luck, sometimes the mood of the crowd or the whim of the emperor. I had seen men spared for a show of courage, others condemned for a single mistake. The arena was a place of rules, but also of chaos, a space where anything could happen. As we engaged, the world outside the arena faded. There was only the clash of steel, the sting of sweat in my eyes, the raw determination to survive. Every movement was a test, every decision final. The sand, the sun, the roar of the crowd, all of it faded to the background as I focused on the fight itself. The outcome was never certain. Even the best fighters could fall, and the untested could rise to glory. The Colosseum was a place of endings and beginnings, of triumph and defeat, of hope and loss. Each contest added another layer to its history, another story to be told. In those first moments on the sand, as the trumpets faded and the crowd's cheers reached their peak, I understood what it meant to face the unknown. The gates did not just open onto a fight, they opened onto a mystery, a future unwritten, shaped by courage, skill, and the unpredictable will of those who watched. The arena demanded everything, yet it gave something back as well. A chance to be seen, to be remembered, to carve out a place in the memory of Rome. The sand beneath my feet was both grave and stage. The faces in the crowd were strangers, but their voices carried the promise of immortality for those who dared to reach for it. Rejection. As the fight began, I moved forward not with certainty, but with resolve. The mystery of the arena was not just in the contest, but in the very act of standing in the light, ready to meet whatever waited on the other side of the gate. Belongings. And in that moment, beneath the eyes of thousands, I was more than a fighter. I was a man standing at the edge of possibility, shaped by all that had come before and all that might still be. The Colosseum's walls held the echoes of every story, every hope, every fear, and now, mine joined them. What happened next would be written in sand and memory, witnessed by a city hungry for spectacle, but beneath the armor and the noise, something quieter endured. The simple, unyielding determination to endure, to hope, and to face the unknown with open eyes. The life of a gladiator was shaped by violence and spectacle, but beneath the armor, they remained men, each carrying hopes, regrets, and a will to survive. The Colosseum transformed struggle into entertainment, forcing every fighter to walk the line between fear and courage. A few earned the rudis, the wooden sword of liberty, and with it, a chance at freedom after years of risking everything for the crowd's favor. The legacy of the arena endures, reminding us that even in the harshest places, humanity persists. If this journey stirred your mind, consider subscribing for more soft-spoken explorations of history's hidden corners.